All right, so it's actually really long, but it's super approachable. It's about like 290-page, very insightful guide from a former social worker. And she's essentially reflecting on years of acquired trauma through work, society, environment, and her clients. And this is Laura Van Dernoot-Lipsky. And she left her job as a social worker, as an emergency room social worker, after 10 years. And she realized that her work, was taking a toll on being present in her life and enjoying her relationships, and being an effective social worker. So she reviews the 16 warning signs of trauma exposure response, which we'll go over, followed by 5 compass signs to help navigate this trauma exposure response. Again, it's very approachable, very easy language. She includes many case studies and try this self-care tips, which I've also included. So what is trauma stewardship? So your stewardship involves, but it's not limited to, your intention in choosing the work that you do, what the philosophy of what it means to help others, the tone of caregiving, or in this case, service providers takes, and our daily decisions about how we live our life. So trauma stewardship, it's not just an idea, but it's actually a daily practice through which individuals, organizations, and societies tend to the hardship, pain, or trauma experienced by humans. And she does talk about also animals, and she goes into a little bit about the environment, but I'll just focus on our residents and people for the sake. So the most important technique in trauma stewardship is learning to stay fully present in our experience, no matter how difficult. And all of the self-care tips include how to stay present. Okay, let's see. So what leads to trauma stewardship? Actually, this phrase, trauma exposure response, which many of you may be familiar with: compassion fatigue or compassion burnout, secondary traumatic stress disorder, vicarious traumatization, empathetic strain, secondary trauma. These are all synonymous with trauma exposure response. And I think I've also referenced it as absorbed trauma. But this is what we're talking about when we say trauma exposure response. Okay, so here we have the 16 warning signs of trauma exposure response, right? These are warning signs that you've experienced somebody else's trauma throughout your career. And these are the implications and results from that. So we have feeling helpless and hopeless, a sense that one can never do enough, hypervigilance. This is that when you are so focused on your job that you can't be present for anything else. Maybe you feel like you're always in a hurry, or in today's society, it's very tricky as we are constantly connected through our phones, through our emails, or at work. I know we have our voicemails forwarded to our emails, and our cell phones, our office phones are forwarded. So you have a sense of hypervigilance. You can see these also kind of all connect to each other as well. We also have diminished creativity, inability to embrace complexity. This is when we are seeking this black or white, yes or no answer. And again, we want to choose this answer or find this answer with urgency rather than to take a situation and kind of use this holistic perspective. Minimizing. Oh, this means you're at your capacity, and you can't let any other information in rather than looking at the given situation. And maybe you minimize your feelings or your own experience. So again, just to be clear, these are warning signs of trauma exposure response. So, is there a question? Okay, I can't see the chat, so I don't know if I heard anything.
هي جانا
think
That's
somebody's.
There isn't a.
Okay, please mute yourself.
Yeah, don't forget to mute yourself. We're hearing conversations that sound like people are on the phone.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Okay, chronic exhaustion. So instead of taking the break you need, you keep pushing yourself harder and harder, which leads to this whole body tired, soul tired, inability to listen or avoidance, disassociative moments, sense of persecution, guilt. And this is also ties into the sense that you can never do enough also. Or maybe you have this guilt where you're comparing your life to your resident's life, and maybe you feel a slight tinge of guilt that you don't have the same conditions. Fear. And this fear isn't necessarily of an item or object or insect, but this is a fear of intense feelings. So you disconnect. This fear inhibits your behavior. So maybe it's a fear of personal vulnerability or potential victimization. Anger and cynicism, inability to empathize or numb, which can also turn into addiction, and grandiosity. So when your work becomes the center of your life, it forms this sense of grandiosity. And maybe you think, well, who else will do it if I'm not here? Or I can't possibly leave, they're relying on me. Maybe this ties into never taking time off or vacation for yourself. Again, so these are the 16 warning signs, and I am giving a snapshot. She does go into more detail in her guide, which I'll be happy to send out the link to view, to get it. But just wanted to give you the idea that these are the warning signs that you have absorbed so much trauma through your residence, through COVID-19, through civil unrest, through systematic oppression. Really, I mean, the list is endless, but I just wanted to give you the idea of what trauma exposure, the warning response, the warning signs to trauma exposure response. Okay, so now what? How do you prevent trauma exposure response from spreading or getting worse? So what you really need to do to practice trauma stewardship is actually knowledge of your own life, what you feel, what you value, what you experience, and what you need to do to take care of yourself. And so the more deeply that you can connect with yourself, the more likely you are to find what you need to do work well, and also with joy again. So how do you do this? It starts with open the inquiry. And we'll talk about this as well. This ties into many of the directions that we'll go over, but open the inquiry. Start asking yourself what events and decisions are most crucial to you, to who you are today. Do you find any consistent themes as you look back over your choices? Practice self-care. You could always even start with acknowledging that your stresses are genuine and you're looking for healthier ways to deal with them, right? This is the opposite of minimizing. You're acknowledging your feelings. And be patient. I think we also live in a society where we're looking for instantaneous gratification, and really trauma stewardship is a process, and it takes time to practice finding yourself and being present, and it takes time to reflect. And you'll see this in the self-care tools as well. So we have the 5 directions, and these are tools to navigate mindfulness and process your trauma exposure response. Okay, so here are the 5 directions. We have north, creating space for inquiry; east, choosing our focus; south, building compassion and community; and west, finding balance. And there is a 5th direction, which is a daily practice of centering myself. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, just checking. Okay, so
No, and
north.
I'm monitoring chat and I haven't seen any.
Okay, all right, sounds good. So creating space for inquiry, you're starting to ask yourself these questions. Why am I doing what I'm doing? So mindfulness begins with being alert to our sensations in the present moment, and it extends to a larger awareness of what we are doing in our lives. So why have we chosen to make the effort towards helping or healing such a prominent part of our lives? And Laura Van Dernoot-Lipsky emphasizes to be honest with yourself about why you're engaged with your work. It could start with even the simplest of questions, like, well, this says what gets you on the bus in the morning, but what gets you in your car? Or if we're working from home, what gets us up? What keeps you showing up? Maybe it's because you have a contribution to make, or maybe it's because you need the health insurance. Either way, starting to ask yourself why you are doing what you're doing leads you to realize that you do have a choice. You do have a choice in the work that you do. And again, I want to emphasize to remove any judgment from reflecting and from thinking about why you're doing what you're doing. Okay, so here we have the first of the self-care tips. I'm not going to read all of these for the sake of time, but I do want to talk about some of them. So the first one, before starting your workday, take a moment to literally stop in your tracks and ask yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing? And after you hear your answer, remind yourself gently that you're making a choice to do this work. Take a deep breath and breathe in both the responsibility and the freedom in this acknowledgement. So again, this takes practice. This may feel strange to do, or maybe funny that we're talking about this, that I'm not going to think when I wake up, why am I doing what I'm doing? But this is the idea of finding yourself and coming back to the present moment. And that's what all these these self-care tools tie back into. I also really appreciate the third one. Regularly write down why you're doing what you're doing and what your intention is. And when you feel yourself going astray, or maybe you've had a bad day or a bad week, or COVID is going on, come back to this list and remind yourself what it is about you and what it is about for you and what it is definitely not about. And we also talked about, actually the second one ties back to a little bit earlier. Consult with someone about why you're doing what you're doing. Choose a trustworthy, supportive, wise person. Now, I do want to add, if you feel like you don't have anybody to consult with, as we talked about, a lot of therapists and mental health professionals are offering free services or sliding scale services, especially now through COVID. So that may be an option for you. Okay, is trauma mastery a factor for me? So trauma mastery addresses one way of coping with trauma. What humans often do to reconcile this lack of control is to create and recreate situations as similar to the traumatic incident as possible. We seek to turn a traumatic situation in which we once felt powerless into a new situation where we feel competent and in charge. We tell ourselves that this time there will be a different outcome, or so we hope. So trauma mastery emerges in our lives through our activities, through our relationships, and our choice of work. And again, this connects back to why you are doing what you're doing. Maybe trauma mastery isn't a factor for you, and that's fine too. But again, this is just starting to get the ball rolling and thinking about your role and your career, and have you reached this burnout point, and what led me to this point. Okay. Is this working for me? When you ask yourself this, make sure you're free of self-judgment and try to be honest. Again, there's no right or wrong. And as you try to open yourself up to the truth, try asking yourself the question in different ways. Does it work for me? How does it work for me? Why does it work for me? And once you've answered these questions, you've kind of activated this new space in your mind. More can or will follow. Am I doing my work with integrity? And so it takes courage to admit that our work may no longer be working for us. And when we gain insight into the why of our work, when we find specific parts that do work, it can also feel like a tremendous gift. So here are some other self-care tools to get the ball rolling, if this work is working for you. You could brainstorm 5 ways in which you think what you are doing is working. Take 3 deep breaths and review your list and assess to what degree those ways are or are not in your best interest or the best interest of those you serve. Create a list of 5 ways in which you would ideally see your work benefiting you, those you serve, and compare the 2 lists. Okay, East, choosing our focus. Where am I putting my focus? What is my plan B? So being conscious of where we are putting our focus can teach us that we have incredible freedom in how we choose to interact with our lives. So in the field, this is called reframing, and it may take different forms. So maybe it means concentrating on what's in front of you, and maybe it means taking a step back and taking another perspective. If one resident dies, maybe you need to take a step back and look at all the other residents who have lived. So again, it's about where are you focusing your energy? Where are you focusing your thoughts? Okay, the next self-care tools. Think of a challenging work situation. Write down 3 things that make it challenging. Write down 3 things that you appreciate about it. Look at your list and ask yourself, where am I more likely to focus and why? And again, I won't go through all these for the sake of time, but these are the tools to help you reflect. And these are the tools to help you navigate your trauma exposure response. All right, what is my plan B? For those who called in and can't necessarily see this, this is a beat up bowling pin talking to the bartender. And the caption says, have you ever considered another line of work? So I really hope everyone out here does not feel like a beat up bowling pin. But if you do, this is something to look into. It's what is your plan B and how to think about that. So again, it may be difficult to think of a plan B, but it's a practice worth trying. And the next self-care tools will go over how to practice this. So there's a great responsibility that comes with this understanding. There is this tremendous freedom as well, and you have the option to change what you do, where you do it, or how we approach the work at hand. So ask yourself, if I weren't doing this work, what would I love to do? Generate a list of 5 things you can do over the next 5 weeks to help you get closer. And tell 3 loved ones about your plan B and ask them to encourage you in that direction. So again, this also goes back to trauma stewardship in that this takes time, and it takes practice, and it takes also this idea of a new thinking, of kind of flexible thinking. Okay, South, building compassion and community. This entails creating a microculture, practicing compassion for myself and others, and asking yourself the question, what can I do for large-scale systemic change? Okay, so microculture means community. Basically, who are your people? And Van Dernoot-Lipsky emphasizes that your people or your community should support you in 2 ways. They should shower you with encouragement, and they should hold you accountable. So these are people in your life who you can debrief with. Maybe it's your staff at staff meetings. Maybe it's your family. These are people that you can laugh with and brainstorm with, cry with, and become better people. Okay, so I think number 2 is key. Identify the members of your microculture and to what degree do they nurture hopefulness, accountability, and integrity. Think about whether you could use stronger role models in any of these areas. Practicing compassion for myself and others. So the world does not need more hostility. I think we're all aware of this. And it does not need more judgment, and it does not need more walls between people, species, or nations. So we can always contribute to the betterment of the world if we initiate compassionate action in the face of wrongdoing. But really what I would like to emphasize is how to have compassion for yourself, which is these next set of tools for you to use. So think of someone from early in your life who showed you a great deal of compassion. Hold them in your thoughts. Recall a time when you were particularly hard on yourself. Ask yourself what your deepest fear was at that time, and close your eyes and replay the situation in your mind, imagining how you could have responded to yourself more compassionately. And then notice how this shift in response feels. I also appreciate the last one as well. Generate a list of 6 people or situations in your life where you think an increase in your compassion could significantly alter the dynamic. Make an intention to approach one of these people or situations with increased compassion each month for 6 months. Pay attention to the difference in your life. Okay, what can I do for large-scale systemic change? Now, Vandernoot Lipsky focuses on Buddhist teachings in this part, which I found really interesting, but she's essentially saying that change really starts with you as an individual. So we may unknowingly influence systems simply by altering the way we interact with them. And that comes down to us as individuals. So we must never underestimate the power of changing ourselves, of committing to being a force for liberation, light, wellness. And on one level, this is the only thing we really can control is ourselves. So again, she draws on this Buddhist teaching that compassion is basically this concept that moves in an ever widening circle that starts with ourselves, and then we extend compassion to those who are close to us. And finally, we extend it to people all over the world. And what she really hits home at is that the deeper our compassion, the clearer our sense of how we can take action is likely to be. Okay, how am I doing on time? 50. Okay, just wanted to check where I was. All right, finding balance. So engaging with our lives outside of work. This is actually a misleading title because it's actually how to engage with your life in work. Maybe you have such a hectic day, and right, that can be working from home too. It's not necessarily just the office. But maybe you feel so weighed down or burdened and overwhelmed in your office that you're not really checking in with yourself. And again, this goes back to trauma stewardship, right? How do you find yourself in the present moment, right? We're always thinking on the go, what's next? What meeting do I have? Who do I have to email? What's next? But Vandernoot Lipsky emphasizes take time at work to check in with yourself. Maybe it's 3 minutes before a meeting, or maybe it's part of your drive. Maybe it's when you have a resident who's running late to your Zoom call or your Zoom meeting. So any one of these moments is an opportunity to regroup and center yourself. And we have more tools about how to engage with yourself outside of work. So identify one thing that you would love to incorporate into your workday, but are certain you cannot. And now try everything in your power to make that aspiration a reality. This may take some revising, this may take some brainstorming, but find a way to do it. And honestly, if anyone tries this, I would really love to hear how it goes as well for all of these. This is something actually I did a few weeks ago. Write down all your sick leave time, vacation, and mental health days and start planning now, right? We have these days allotted to us for a reason, and you should use them to recharge and come back to yourself. Okay, moving energy through. Okay, so essentially when we are stressed out or we're dealing with trauma exposure response, we find that your internal energy could be blocked. And Vandernoot Lipsky emphasizes moving your energy through, right, to help steward your trauma. And so this doesn't necessarily refer to stillness, but it refers to a mindful and disciplined approach of detoxing, cleansing, and putting your burdens down. Now, some of us already do this through running or exercising. Maybe you have a guided meditation app or guided breathing. Either way, moving energy through will help you process your trauma exposure response. And we have more tips here with these next try this. And if we were in a room, I would love to practice these. So again, also for the sake of time, I really encourage you to try these and follow up with me and tell me how these work out. But again, I wish we were all in a room in New Orleans and could try this out. I guess that's 2021. So stand or sit in a comfortable position. And as you raise your hands above your head, breathe in. As you lower your arms, breathe out. Do this for 20 times slowly. I don't want you to get dizzy, so make sure you pace yourself. So commit to walking or running or wheeling or biking outside for 5 minutes during every hour that you're working. And during this 5 minutes, focus on breathing in deeply and breathing out slowly. And notice what's around you. Notice anything beautiful around you and breathe that in as well. Okay, gratitude. So locating something to be thankful for at all times is an essential part of trauma stewardship. It's another way that we can reframe our circumstances through mindfulness. And we can also view some of our most challenging residents or our most challenging experiences as our teachers that can help make really tough times a little more bearable. So how do you show gratitude? At both the beginning and end of your workday, take a distinct moment to think of one thing you are grateful for. Every single day, think of one person you're grateful to and tell that person. Also, advocate for your workplace to create a forum, maybe where you and your colleagues can express gratitude to one another. Maybe that could be during staff meetings, during these newsletters that go out, to emails with each other. I know it's hard with not all of us in the office, but if there's a bulletin board where people do walk by and see it, that could be really helpful. I also wanted to take this a step further, and then I thought it would be really interesting to talk about gratitude in your ESL classes. So this is a little bit outside of the trauma stewardship, but I would be really curious, and I think that would be really powerful to learn how gratitude is expressed in other cultures. So that may be something to consider. Maybe take a moment of gratitude at the beginning of your Zoom happy hours or your Zoom bingos with residents as well. So just wanted to plug that in there and say to try that out. Okay, the fifth direction. So a daily part of centering ourselves. So all four of the directions lead to the fifth direction, which is internal. The direction leads us inside to our core, where we center ourselves. And then gracefully it leads us back out, where we feel renewed and again present and able to handle your work and handle your life and moving at it in the best way possible. So we're all capable of creating a daily practice to center ourselves. It may be a couple minutes, it may be 2 hours, but really this is the hope that this is something that you can commit to. And again, it takes time. So 2 techniques to help start your practice: create an intention for your day. The intention can focus on a mood or an action. I will notice one thing to find joy in today. I will go to the gym. I will refrain from gossiping. And the second technique is also to cultivate moments of mindfulness, allowing ourselves to hear the bells that can bring us back to this present moment that will greatly influence your ability to practice trauma stewardship. Some examples include setting an hourly alarm on your watch, reminding you to stop and pause for a minute, or making a resolution to hear a mental bell that reminds you to choose your words carefully, maybe when you're about to use some choice words that you shouldn't. Or even dividing up your days into thirds, so you have the beginning, middle, and end. Maybe it's marked by several minutes of bell time. Okay, and a few other self-care tools to find mindfulness. So when your day begins, you could close your eyes, take several deep breaths, and ask yourself, what is my intention today? At the end of your day, before you fall asleep, ask yourself, what can I put down? What am I ready to be done with? what don't I need to carry with me for another day? So put it down and don't pick it up again the next day. I think we call this the Sunday scaries when we're thinking about what we have on Monday. And this is saying to practice, what can you put down right before you're about to sleep? And I found this last one really poignant as well. Designate a day of rest, whether you identify it as Shabbat or you take a weekly day of non-obligation for yourself. What this does is that this is a way to reconnect with yourself. And it also reminds you that, I think this is really important, that as individuals and as members of a society, it's really about your deepest essence, right? Your mental well-being. It's not about what we produce during the week. Okay, so I just wanted to emphasize that because I think everybody needs to hear that sometimes. Sometimes, again, with the pandemic, with civil unrest, if you have a natural disaster, sometimes we're thinking this mode of what we are doing all the time. How are we productive? Are we meeting everyone's needs? But this is really about you and making sure you take that time for yourself. So I just wanted to expand upon that. Okay, how are we doing on time? Oh, we're at 4:01. Okay, I didn't want to keep you too much longer. So now you know the 16 warning signs of trauma exposure response, the 5 directions as a guide for trauma stewardship, and you have try this tools to check in with yourself.
I want to thank everybody for participating, for everybody that's presented that's still here. I enjoyed spending time with you all and really appreciate everybody. Oh, there's Maria. Everybody that helped us put this together. So thank you, and be well, be safe.